Brett Maxam, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Will, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Brett, you bought a business related to residential construction. Scary. And that is a plane ride away from your home. Scarier. And yet you've made it work for yourself very well indeed. You are working on, not in the business, to say the least. So we're going to learn all about how you have pulled this off. Start us off, please, Brett, with what were you doing before you decided you wanted to buy a business, and why did you make that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I decided I wanted to buy a business, I was an executive in a private equity-backed business, something I've been doing for about 10 years in the role of CFO with a couple interim roles as CEO. Was fun, challenging, enjoyed the work, but had been through enough acquisitions, a couple exits, and thought that, you know what, I can do that myself and have all the equity in the business and be running the show. So I was excited to find something that I could acquire and run myself.
So you worked in private equity portcos. You were not at the fund level. You were not a private equity guy, but you were kind of adjacent and saw into how private equity worked. You saw a lot of transactions, right? So this gave you some proximity to buying businesses at kind of private equity style, and also piqued your interest.
Yeah, exactly. So I had gotten into. I started my career in public accounting. We can get into that a little bit if you'd like, but decided to leave public accounting and came over to an opportunity where I could lead the finance function within a private equity-backed company. They had just made their investment, and that was a path to becoming the CFO of that company. And with them, I was with them for almost 5 years. Started off, we were doing about $8 million in revenue. And when I left, almost 5 years later, we had grown the company to $65 million in revenue. With that, had done 4 acquisitions. Those acquisitions, I really led point on the due diligence, integration, and post close of those and how those integrated into the company. And ton of fun, very challenging. It was a great experience. Every day was a little bit different and really enjoyed that. So that put me through the ringer. And then I went on to do that with 2 other full-time roles and a couple of fractional CFO roles as well.
Great. So it was your proximity to seeing all these transactions that led you to realize or want to do it yourself. This was not something where somebody mentioned ETA to you, entrepreneurship through acquisition, or you were in a business school and took a class, or you saw Cody Sanchez online. This was kind of from your frontlines experience, but you then did go down the rabbit hole. Did you not? Read the books, listen to the pods?
Yeah, absolutely. So I knew that I wanted to do it. And I'd say even early on, I had an inkling that, okay, let me make sure I'm paying attention, what's working well, what's not, for an eventual thought that I want to become a business owner. And so that was always a thought in the back of my mind. I'm an avid reader. And so as I went out to look for those resources, that's how I came to find HBR's How to Buy a Business, Walker Diebold's book, and just began consuming all of that content. It was as I was, looking at Biz Buy Sell and other opportunities that I actually came across the term ETA and discovered that was an actual thing out there.
Yeah, it was a thing, which must have been even more validating of the path that you'd chosen for yourself. Okay, so what did your search look like, starting with where were you based? Where are you based?
Yeah, so my family and I are based in the south suburbs of Denver. And initially we were looking for a business based in Denver. We started off our search in probably around December 2023 and just started looking at what was available on Biz by Sell, reaching out to brokers, reaching out to my network, knowing a lot of accountants, attorneys, insurance guys, kind of looking under anything I could and reaching out to whomever I could. That led to a lot of interesting businesses. I've always worked in and on smaller mid-market businesses that every new one was something that, I didn't really picture it existed before. So I didn't really have a honed in buy box where it was, we're only going to buy an HVAC company or a plumbing company. So it was fairly open. We looked at, my wife and I, or me looking at it and sharing what I found with my wife, looked at quite a bit. And definitely had a few false starts. A couple of businesses we looked into that we issued LOIs for, negotiate LOIs, only to find areas of concern that we decided to walk away. We had one LOI on a business in the mountains of Colorado that we just couldn't agree to a purchase price with, and then thought we found the perfect business, a really cool commercial plumbing company that we got into LOI on in probably June of 2024 and went through that full process, negotiated the purchase price, negotiated a purchase agreement, got SVA financing approval. We were pretty much 2 days before close, actually going to the broker's office to meet with the sellers to finalize the disclosure checklist and just cover any remaining questions on that before hoping to close that next week. And about 45 minutes before that meeting, the broker called and said, "Hey, I'm not sure what's going on. The deal's off. The sellers just called me. I don't have any more details than that. Sorry." And that was, in the fall of 2024, and just crushing, because we had been through 4 rounds of the purchase agreement. We had incurred all the legal fees.
Had you quit your job, Brett?
I had not.
Searching full time?
I was still with my job at the time. My expectation was that once we had that locked in, then I would give notice and have that transition period. It was an opportunity where pretty solid management team in place. And so it was something where I was going to be more working on the business than in the business right away.
Mm-hmm. We hope.
Yes. Yeah, that's always the hope.
In fact, you bought something, I think, smaller, less likely to be able to be worked on rather than in, and yet here you sit 1,000 miles from the business, working on it, not in it. So we'll get there. But Brett, what were your criteria in terms of size and SDE or EBITDA, and tie that to what kind of salary did you want to be able to pay yourself out of the acquired business?
It's probably similar to what a lot of your audience is looking for in the search space. And we were looking for, my wife and I, something doing SDE as low as 700,000, maybe up to 1.5 million. Ideally generating enough income to draw $200,000 or so of wages payable and service the debt on it, and then give us a cushion where, liquidity wasn't going to be too challenging, where we could build up assets within the business.
Mm-hmm. And this, referring to your wife, to what degree was this a partnered search versus just, you're conferring with her as you go down this life-changing path?
Much more conferring with her. My wife's amazing, smarter than me, and just a great sounding board. That being said, I was really in the trenches on the search and would, as opportunities came up, catch her up on them. You really use her for that first line of poking holes in the deal.
Yeah.
What about this? Okay, how are you going to do that? And, but yeah, through that process, really looking at that 750 to 1.5 million, anything less than that, we felt like might be a little too small, and not generate the income we were looking to get from that.
Great. So the commercial plumbing deal collapses. You don't even know why. It just, or maybe collapses isn't the right word. It's pulled at the last minute for mysterious reasons that are extremely frustrating.
That's a good way to say it. Yes.
And then how do you find this business in Vancouver, Washington?
So we went back and looked at all the other deals we had been looking at, revisiting those to see if they were still out there. Meanwhile, seeing what else we could find. Much of it was through Biz Buy Sell. And then we just started expanding our search. We had done a little bit of that throughout the summer as we were trying to find the right business. So my wife and I had already had those conversations of, okay, if it's not in our backyard, where would be places we would be interested eventually moving to, visiting quite a bit, spending quite a bit of time in. I'm originally from Indiana, went to school in Ohio. Beautiful places, just not areas I want to spend a lot of my time, but really like the western part of the country. And so we were very open to really anything in Colorado or west. We really like the Pacific Northwest. We had looked at a few other opportunities out there that we didn't end up moving forward with, but had even visited a business out there. So we're very open to that area. So started looking in.
Brett, how did you think about the question of distance and all these far-flung locations were going to require you to fly to them? And I guess you were open to maybe moving, but and of course, and then later in the conversation, we'll contrast your expectations with what you've actually found. But I'm sure in your going down the rabbit hole, you bumped up at some point against the advice that not as their first business, buy one that requires getting on a plane to go visit and manage in person. How'd you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of soul searching and just making sure it would be something we'd be comfortable with. And there was that little bit of discomfort, a little bit of challenge, but I'm also coming from a history of almost 10 years as a executive in a private equity company where, very often I was working 60, 70-hour weeks with companies that, headquarters might have been in Denver, but we own companies in, across the country. So doing a fair amount of traveling for that. And, just thinking about
that's an important answer. Like the format of remote management, flying to a site as you needed to, was one that you were comfortable with, had a lot of experience in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had teams that reported to me for easily the last 7 to 8 years that were remote. That I had people in California or Wisconsin or Alabama that were reporting to me, and had gotten very comfortable with that. Yeah. So we knew it was going to be a challenge, but we were faced with a circumstance where we felt like we weren't seeing anything in the Denver market that looked appealing. The couple things we had looked at were at multiples much higher than we were comfortable going to, and felt like there was a lot of risk in that if we were buying a company doing $1 million of SDE, but at a 5x multiple, it would stretch us pretty thin there with the debt service as well as, amount we wanted to put down as a down payment.
Great. And that really is a big swath of territory that you opened yourselves up to, from Denver north to the Canadian border and I guess west to the Pacific. Right? Or maybe you weren't going to go to California. That's one that we often hear.
Looking at California.
Okay.
We've spent a lot of time in California, and I've through previous employment had subsidiaries in California and was familiar with the pros and cons and challenges of that.
Yeah.
Part of this was looking for a company that eventually, when, I've got kids in high school, once they're out of high school, that we could see ourselves moving to, or at least having a second home in those areas. And Many challenges California has. The weather's beautiful, and there are some nice things to do there.
Tell us about the discovery of this business.
So yeah, this was in December, and we came across the business that was listed on Biz Buy Sell as a concrete flatwork company.
Concrete flatwork.
Concrete flatwork. So what concrete flatwork is we pour garages, driveways, porches, patios, and sidewalks for high production home builders.
High production home builders. So new homes are going in. It's a new development, a new subdivision, one of these big national names, or maybe not. Maybe it's a local regional home builder. And they're putting up a bunch of houses, and these houses have certain concrete needs, the ones you just mentioned: driveway, porch, sidewalk. What did I miss?
Driveway, porch, patio, garage, sidewalk.
Garage. Sorry. Yeah. And you guys will pour the concrete for that. Your customer is the home builder. Great. Okay. So very, as I said at the top, very tied to residential construction, actually new construction. So even more tied to cyclicality, we'll discuss, and project-based.
Yes.
So why this business, Brett, of all the businesses in the Pacific Northwest down to Denver?
Yeah. So as we dug into it, something I really liked, and as I researched the area more, I wasn't aware of Vancouver, Washington before this. Vancouver's sister city to Portland, just on the other side of the Columbia, and kind of a bedroom community to Portland. It's a growing area, a lot of demand. You have zero income tax in Washington. So it's a very desirable area, and seeing a lot of continued growth, a lot of spending on infrastructure, and an area that we felt like would be maybe a little more protected against a correction in the housing market, and got comfortable through it that way. What I really liked about the business was that while you don't have that repeat revenue for a specific house, I mean, house eventually will need new concrete, but that's 20, 30 years out. What you did have was working with national, regional, and local home builders was a certain level of known pipeline and backlog. Typically what happens is we will get issued as a new lot gets developed, we'll get issued 5 to 6 purchase orders for each item we're pouring. And we typically find out about those a month and a half to 3 months out. So a fairly decent backlog that you can plan on. You have the pipeline that is the entire neighborhood, because we're awarded a neighborhood at a time, typically with add-on phases. So you have a decently high level of confidence in the near term of what you're going to be doing. Additionally, for us, there's the markets that the company's been in, but we're not currently in right now, of more commercial work, project-based, or residential replacements or add-ons. That in the past, as the housing market has been challenged, the former owner has gone into those areas as well and been able to find work to keep the teams going. Additionally, what we liked about the area was that the fairly mild climate. We're able to work year round. This last year, there were only 2 days where weather didn't permit us to do work. But we're out there, rain, shine. If I think the 2 days we couldn't work, there was a bad frost, and the concrete ready mix plant was shut down those 2 days.
And so Vancouver, Washington, other side of the river from Portland, another side of the state line from Portland, but essentially Portland Metro. We can think about this as kind of the Portland Metro area.
Yes. I mean, it's
okay.
From the airport to my shop, it's 20 minutes.
You could probably pretty easily calculate the TAM and get yet one more data point about demand for your services beyond your own pipeline, which I take your point that was a great kind of leading indicator of where revenue is going to come from in the coming months. Because I, as I understand, like a lot of cities will just know a year or two or more in advance, like how many new homes will be built in a metropolitan area in the coming 2 or 3 years. And that's basically your TAM, right? How many new homes
absolutely.
are going to be built in the Portland metro between now and 2027? And you can kind of, that's your mark, that's it. Fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And right now we're only doing work in the state of Washington, but look to Oregon as a market we can expand into as needed. I kind of joke, I drive around in circles when I'm out there. We basically have anywhere between 7 and 9 neighborhoods that we're actively working on within 20 minutes of our shop. And I'm just, got my teams going around in circles to those various locations, depending on the day we're setting up and then pouring the next day.
And tell us about the kind of bullet points of the business: age, employees, revenue, whatever you can share.
Yeah. So we've got, let's see, age of the business is a little over, I think, 30 years now in business. And has always done residential work, but has branched out into commercial and maybe direct to consumer as well. But really in the last, I think, 5 to 10 years is really just focused on that residential, high production, new construction building. Team, it fluctuates. Right now, I think we've got 13 team members, including 1 virtual accountant. And right now I'm actually hiring, so looking for additional concrete finishers. Typically our labor pool is, we've got setup teams who kind of light carpentry work, laborers, and then concrete finishers who typically have years of experience and a little bit higher skill set. But always looking to train our laborers into becoming those finishers. From a revenue standpoint, currently targeting, I'd say, mid $3 million to maybe $4 million of revenue this year.
Is that with growth, or is that what it was at when you bought it last year? So you bought it when did you close?
We closed February 1st.
Feb 1st.
This year.
And we're going to unpack the deal because there's a lot to learn from that as well. So basically, the beginning of this year, Feb 1st. So that number that you said, mid 3s to maybe 4 of revenue, is that also what it was in 2024?
2024, I think the first part of the year took a little bit of a dip, but that's about averaging between 3 and maybe not quite $4 million the last few years. So somewhat steady. For this year, we have been able to add 2 additional subdivisions, actually 3 additional subdivisions, 2 with an existing builder and 1 with a new builder so far. So have been able to grow that month to month. We're somewhat subjective to what the builders are doing from how many homes they're starting in their neighborhood. And typically we may have POs for 3 months, but we'll find out right now on August 15th, we may get some clarity or get some revisions on how many houses are being started in September that typically we won't start working on until late September, October.
And so roughly how many houses a year do you do?
Oh, we're probably
Very
doing,
roughly.
I'd say between 240 to maybe 300 or so. A lot of month-to-month fluctuation with that. For example, August is going to be our busiest month of the year so far. We're seeing a lot of builders pushing to get houses done by the end of 2025, which means they really need to be worked on right now in the month. So we're seeing an acceleration there.
And what are margins like in a business like this? Or if you can just tell us what the SDE was?
Yeah, so SD was right around, not quite $1 million, but kind of in that higher area. I don't want to get into too many details of that, but
Higher end of 6 figures.
Higher end of 6 figures.
And so right where you had hoped, above the threshold of where you were looking, or where,
exactly.
your window was. Great. Well, as I said, I want to get into the anatomy of the deal. There's some, which was a great one, but a little bit more on just how you assess the business. So we've already kind of talked about, or we have already talked about getting comfortable with flying back and forth. What about just the management of a business like this? So project-based construction businesses are notoriously difficult businesses, and operationally, let alone, quality of revenue questions and so on, but operationally, I mean. And a blue-collar workforce, it's something that I don't think really had worked with before. Correct me if I'm wrong. What were you thinking in terms of just like how much, leadership am I going to be able to exert? Is the team going to want or need? That kind of obvious question. These are hard businesses, even if you're in them all the time, let alone if you're flying back and forth.
I had done some work with blue-collar workforces, so that wasn't entirely new to me. But you're right. It's a business that's out of state. That the seller was, I guess one of the areas that gave me comfort was the seller had taken a pretty big step back from the business a few years ago with some health challenges. Not going to get into the details of that, but had been decently hands-off with it at that point. Had a really strong foreman that we still have, who's amazing, who'd been with the business, really working with the seller since before he even formed the business. So over 30 years. Guy knows a ton about the business, and so had some comfort that he was going to be there with it. We haven't gotten into it yet, but we moved pretty quick with the transaction. And I actually was out there in Vancouver meeting with the seller and actually working with him and driving around, meeting all of the employees and all of the customers in mid-January before we actually closed on the business.
Oh, wow.
So was able to actually see a lot of that in progress, had dinner with the seller and the foreman. And so had a chance to meet him, confirm that he wasn't planning to go anywhere.
Was there an explicit conversation about the fact like, hey, Mr. Foreman, I don't live here, so I'll be managing you remotely, and I probably as we transition the business, I'll be here more frequently, but that will probably taper off a little bit over time. Did you guys get into that central question directly, or not so much?
Not as directly.
Or it was implied, maybe, because he knew you didn't live there and weren't planning to move there.
It was implied. I was playing it a little bit close to the vest that I wasn't fully intending to move my whole family out there. But I mean, my intention was originally that maybe for the first year to 2 years, I would be out there 3 to 4 days a week. And so originally we went into it thinking that I was going to be commuting, jumping on a plane first thing Monday morning and out there through Thursday or Friday. So we had the hopes that, we could ramp that back, but we went into it thinking that I was going to be spending quite a bit of time out there.
Okay. So this kind of incredible situation you find yourself in was actually not planned, or at least not this early in the journey. Early in the journey.
It's gone incredibly well, and been very fortunate that what the owner or the seller and his wife were doing, we were able to automate some of those processes, really delegate some of them as well, and then hired a virtual accountant to take on the remaining items, so that when I do go out there, I'm now spending much more time, working on the business, meeting with the customers, looking at opportunities to grow, look at, other builders we can be working with, meeting with my foreman, but doing a lot less of the actual in the business day to day.
this is something we're going to return to and just exactly like how this is working out so well. So we'll come back to it, but let's hear now, before we get too far away from it, the terms of the deal that you negotiated to acquire the business, please.
Sure. And again, keeping it fairly high level, we were able to buy the business for less than $2 million. Got it at a very nice multiple, sub 3x multiple. And due to some concentrations in the business, we're actually able to negotiate a 70% seller note. So we didn't go the SBA route on this one, and got very friendly terms with that. So it helped mitigate a lot of the risk going into it with concentrations, new construction, out of state.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit, Brett. It still is a loan, even though it's not SBA. It's still a loan you got to pay. Although you probably don't have a personal guarantee. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No personal guarantee on that.
Okay. Well, that's a huge removes a lot of the most dire risk of one of these SBA style projects. But it still is a loan that you have to pay. You still do have monthly payments. But how did this come about? 70% seller financing. This is the sort of thing a guru would tell the world that you should go out and try to find. But we wiser heads know that it hardly ever happens. How did you negotiate so much seller financing?
Yeah, I think definitely some luck had to play in it, where I believe the business had been looked at by a few others. I think had gone through the process of trying to get SBA financing on it and had seen some challenges with that. And so had a pretty frank conversation very early on with the broker that, I like the business, but it does have some hair on it, does have some customer concentrations. And that, if I was interested in doing this, I would look to see if the seller would take on a note for a majority of it. And so that was fairly positively received.
So you opened the conversation that way, or you opened the negotiation with that kind of putting a stake in the ground.
Yes.
And the seller didn't, or the broker representing the seller didn't flinch.
No, he, great broker, and I think had done a good job of educating the seller. And I think also it helped that they had been through the paces with a couple other buyers who had discovered it wasn't maybe the business you'd buy with 10% down and a 90% SBA note.
And this hair that you're referring to, aside, is there hair other than the customer concentration and the market being cyclical?
There is some cyclicality in the market. The business, to me, some of what mitigated it was that the business has been running for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
That there are different levers to pull. Certainly if you're seeing new construction ease up, you can start to look at doing more direct-to-consumer jobs, residential driveway replacements, RV pads, that type of thing. And we've got very few fixed costs. If we've got a week where we're not pouring, my team's hourly salary, and they realize that, some weeks may be 20 hours. Other weeks, right now is one of those weeks where maybe it's going to be a 60-hour week. And, you want to make hay while the sun's shining and, hopefully sock away some of that overtime that they're getting. But if we're not pouring, my cost goes substantially down. I'm not paying for concrete. I'm not paying for labor. And so that helped in the short term think about some of those risks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then having the seller note, I've got a very motivated seller who wants to see me succeed and has been great to work with. We ramped down the transition of time pretty quickly, but as things come up, he's pretty responsive. I'll text him and say, hey, we have this warranty issue or looking to do this. What would you recommend? And, that seller note keeps him very engaged and, me being successful in the business.
Yeah. And does the seller note have any forgivability attached to it? So if you lose one of those big customers, for example, you don't have to, you can pay proportionally less of the seller note back?
It doesn't. We looked at that with a few other deals, but because of what we were able to do on the multiple as well as the terms of the seller note, felt like we were getting enough where that wasn't necessary. It would have been a great addition to that and further de-risked it, but I think we were pushing up against the limit of what we could already get out of that.
And in the term of the loan, because one of the things, this was actually covered in a recent webinar with Chelsea Wood of Acquisition Lab, where there's this notion that seller financing, the more the better, and it's always a net positive. And of course, as I just kind of jokingly said to you, not suggesting you didn't realize it, but I was more joking kind of in the face of this notion that it's still a debt. So everyone treats it like it's somehow less onerous or less bad than a bank debt, but it's not necessarily.
No. Yeah. I mean, it's still money that we owe and that has to be paid back.
And also, like, what are the terms of the loan? Every loan's like, you know, how good or bad a loan it is comes down to the terms. So it's very the simplistic to suggest that just seller financing is a good thing. So
absolutely.
What are the terms? Can you share what the terms were?
Yeah. So as I was negotiating with the broker, and we started off getting agreement that that 70% was the right amount, and we kind of backed into that based on how much I could comfortably feel that I could put down on the business. So we got through all of it really backing into things. So we started off, okay, this is the amount that I could put down cash at close, which means this amount will be the note, which ended up being that 70%. And then there was a certain dollar amount that the seller was targeting that he wanted to get in monthly payments. And so that was the next area. Okay, we can feel comfortable about doing that. And, one of the last items was the interest rate on it. And I was, kind of saying, okay, well, if we know the amount and we know the payment, great. Can we get away with a 0% interest rate? And it didn't end up that great, but we were able to get to a 5% interest rate and then just solved for what the amortization period was based on the rate and the payment.
What did the amortization period end up being?
Amortization period ended up being, I'd have to look, I think somewhere between 7 and 8 years. And I'll stay silent to the payment amount because then you could back into the whole deal. But
okay. Well, let me
being an area we were comfortable with.
Well, and so let me, as you should have been, Brett.
Yes.
Because let me underline a few things there. 7 to 8 years. So for SBA style, you didn't do SBA, but SBA style, self-funded style search businesses, we have all gotten accustomed to 10-year loan terms because that's what the SBA is. But that's an uncommonly long loan in the world of business lending. And so it's one more reason that SBA loans are really appealing and arguably, could only exist through government subsidy. That's a really long term. And so, and so further evidence of that, when you do get seller financing in these deals, often you can sometimes see 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, super short periods, maybe more standard to be 3 to 5 years, but 7 to 8 is that's a nice long term.
Oh yeah.
So that's great. And that you got it at a really compelling interest rate. Also great. And then the final point I'll just make is that this is such a good example of, so what you said is your seller just had this monthly number in mind he wanted to receive from you in the form of debt, his loan payment on his loan, which is going to be his income going forward for the next 7 or 8 years. It's just such a good example of that psychology, which is easy to forget, that oftentimes sellers, they just have a number in mind. It's not necessarily based on the market value of the business. It's more based on whatever their own psychology or their own personal needs. And it sounds like this is a little bit one of those.
Yeah. I mean, it was very much, in these conversations, I try to always remind myself to maybe shut up and let them do a little more talking.
Yeah.
Whether it's a broker or a seller, if they want to share, great. Then maybe ask a few leading questions and absorb what you can, because otherwise, I mean, in this circumstance, I would have been negotiating against myself. So why not find out what they're really looking for and slow roll it a little bit, and came out to a really great outcome.
That is probably the most useful and powerful advice that I've heard in dozens of episodes. And we've all heard it. It's a bit of a cliche, actually, in negotiation. Just be quiet, be comfortable with silence. That's not exactly what you said, but that's an adjacent piece of advice. Be quiet, be comfortable with silence, and let your other part of your counterparty talk and keep talking. And often things will be revealed that are helpful to understand, to craft a deal that you both find is what you want. So, and by the way, that's probably good advice in life, not just in business transactions. So I love it. Brett, so we've talked now about the 70%. That 30% was solely from you, or did you raise money from investors or friends and family?
No. So from the deal that I mentioned earlier that ended up falling apart, a little bit bigger deal that we had already gone down the path of setting up a Rob's account, utilizing my wife and my 401ks to originally intended to fund that deal, and that we just left open and were able to use for this deal. So it was a combination of 401k funds and then personal taxable accounts that we had. And went back and forth on that, whether or not we really wanted to go down that path. But
which path? The 401k path?
Utilizing the 401k.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And ultimately came to the decision that it gave us a little more flexibility while maintaining complete ownership of the company, and maybe being able to do a bigger deal than we otherwise would have. I think if we didn't have that, we still could have done the deal without the ROWs, but we already had that set up. And so yeah, it added a little bit of nuance, but because we already had that set up, cash in Rob's qualified 401k accounts, that made it really easy just to set up the next deal and actually get a pretty quick close.
Great. Now I know you don't want to say the exact purchase price, but we heard you say that revenues are. We heard you say what SDE was, and that you got it for in the range of 3. So we can basically, I think it's fair to say, mid 6 figures.
Yeah, yes,
mid 6 figures is what you brought, and that was a combination of 401k and your own balance sheets. So so just to be clear, you had that money.
Yes,
only because you tapped your 401k. Yeah.
Yes, and that way we could also have some excess room, some emergency funds, and weren't completely all in on the business.
So you're still somewhat liquid. You still have cash and reserves.
Gave us that ability to have cash and reserves. And someone had given me advice years ago to, if you ever look at doing SBA, if you have any equity in your house, take out a home equity line of credit, even if you don't tap it. So had that set up already. So have some different.
Say more about that, Brett. What is that tip? You're the second person I've heard say that in as many months. So please, if you would, for the audience.
So my understanding is that if you do go down the SBA route, which we had originally considered, that it's very, it's recommended, or it's a good tip to go in and secure a home equity line of credit, essentially a second mortgage on your house. You don't necessarily need to use those funds, but by getting that in place, if you were to go the SBA route, then they allow you to keep that open. And in some cases, they look at that as being fully drawn upon. And some cases, they don't put a lien on your home as part of that SBA process.
With the second mortgage, you basically are withdrawing equity, built up equity out of your home down to whatever, like 20% or something.
Sure.
And then I think the SBA only will put a lien against your home if you have equity above some threshold,
so
like
twofold.
25.
So it could be
something.
only if you have that equity left above it, or that they enter into the third lien position, that if you hadn't done that and you do need the home equity, you actually have to go to the SBA and get approval to get that home equity loan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's wise just to get that in place, whether or not it gets you out of having that lien on your home through the SBA.
Mm-hmm. So two good reasons to do it. Mm-hmm.
For us, ours wasn't utilized. It just gave us that additional cushion beyond our personal assets, that if something did go wrong, we had different avenues.
Yeah. Circling back just to your loan, it just occurs to me there was one other really good element of it, which is it's fixed. So it's a low interest rate.
It is.
And it's a fixed interest rate, which is very rare in SBA land. I've heard it happen a time or two, but it's usually variable. And of course, as interest rates have gone up, many searchers, self-funded searchers using SBA loans have been punished by that badly. And so that's something that you don't have to worry about. Now, obviously, we expect interest rates, if anything, they'll probably be coming down, drifting down in the next few years, but you never know. And fixed when it's a low rate, as it is in your case, that's the best.
I mean,
for
we'll see if I can
good.
ever get a business loan sub 5%, and refinance it. But I'm not too worried about that, and I'm not sure that that'll come up. But in the meantime, taking out that variable of, hearing so many horror stories of someone getting a, mid 5, 6, 7%, 8% loan, and then having it go up 3-4 percentage points or doubling, and just destroying their cash flows. So having that fixed is huge.
And it has literally put some searchers out of business.
Oh yeah.
So it can easily be, and has been in cases that I'm aware of, fatal. So it's not to be taken lightly. Fantastic. Now, one other challenge with these types of businesses, construction businesses, residential or otherwise, is working capital. And you hear this all the time because you projects, and now your projects are probably they're shorter term than other projects might be. How long is a given project, by the way, Brett, in your world?
Projects are a quick turnaround.
Couple days.
Yeah. With a semi-custom home builder, custom home builder, we're breaking each house up into 5 separate purchase orders. So we're able to invoice as soon as we do the work. So typically 1 to 2 days or 2 to 3 days. One day we'll set up whatever we're going to pour. We'll pour it the next day and invoice it as soon as we're done with that.
Yeah.
And so typically we're getting paid 20 to 45 days. And that 45 days might just be the time to process it. And some of our builders pay on the 10th of the month. So if we get it in on the 5th, they might have already had their cutoff. So we don't get paid until that next window. And then it takes a few days. A lot of them still mail it. So then you're just waiting for the check to arrive.
Yeah.
But fairly quick turnaround.
So just to underline this for people, there are typically 2 working capital, big kind of issues in construction. The first that you just named, the contractors, the GC, the general contractors, or the home builders in your case, pay slowly. For whatever reason in construction land, that's the culture, and you ain't going to break it. So they pay slowly. So you do the work, then don't get paid, in your case, 20 to 45 days later. Sometimes it's worse than that. So that's one issue, and we're going to return to it in a second. The other is, which you don't have, is the work in process. So if it's a long project, you're getting paid incrementally as you complete the work. It's one more complication to deal with in working capital. And for the inexperienced searcher out there finding themselves buying a business like this and finding themselves dealing with that, it can be overwhelming indeed. And, not a lot of room for error there. And it's not to be taken lightly. And I've heard more than one, due diligence provider, CPA, say a first-time searcher or somebody who doesn't come from construction should not buy a business like that. It's just the working capital complexity is too much. Okay. returning now
So I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And to me, it was, we weren't having these months-long projects where you have to worry about working capital, revenue recognition, all of the things that go with that, slow pay, and even realizing that you thought you did 90% of the work only to find out you actually did 60% of the work, and you have all these additional costs. If an error happens, if we screw something up, then we might have to, rip out our work and repour, but it's an extra day of work, and usually, one of 5 or 10 other things we'd be doing that day. So this business has a very low risk for, if you completely screw something up and make it right, it doesn't hurt you that badly.
Yeah. No, that's great. What a great quality of the business. Still, Brett, the working capital, your receivables taking, call it 45 days to arrive. That's still a long time. And can be tricky to deal with, to learn. I'm not hearing from you any of the working capital, you think you understand it, but your first time as business owner, you realize you really don't understand it until you're actually dealing with it. And it's an important feature of many searchers' experiences. But I'm not hearing that from you. Is that because you're a CPA, you've seen into these business, like you're experienced with working capital, or what?
Most of my CPA career, I wasn't very good at tax. I wasn't very good at audit, or maybe I wasn't that passionate about it either. So I never became a great technician in either of those fields. I always enjoyed business advisory, and so spent quite a bit of time working with companies, building out 13-week cash flows, helping them with projects, did a fair amount of fractional CFO work before becoming a CFO. And, it's a simple tool, but a 13-week cash flow is critical to running any business. And
give us 60 seconds on that. I mean, it sounds self-explanatory, but you're the first person to say that so emphatically.
Oh yeah. So you got to have a 13-week cash flow. What that basically is a simple Excel spreadsheet where you look at 13 weeks, which is a fourth of a year. And you're basically saying, okay, top of it, here's my cash balance I'm starting with. Here's the revenue that I'm expecting to collect. And here are my cash expenses that are going out. And every week, solve for ending cash. The next week, you've got your beginning cash, and you just flow them out there. You may, in the next couple weeks to month, you may have a really nice, accurate picture of what you're expecting to collect. And from then on, it's just a guess, but you've got your, I know I'm going to be paying my loan payment every month. I know I'm going to be paying my rent every month. I've got a pretty decent expectation of, if I do this much revenue, I'm going to be paying this much labor and concrete and my other vendors. And so it's just plug and play. And you go through that exercise, and then you take a step back and say, all right, do I have enough cash, or where am I getting tight and when? And if that is the case, hopefully it's 10, 11, 12, 13 weeks out when you have enough time to actually figure out and do something about that. So that's an exercise I went through, modeling the business as part of my due diligence, to really say, okay, here's my base case, here's my high, here's my low. What do I need in working capital to make sure that 6 weeks out, I don't have a problem? And so going through that process is how I backed into the amount of working capital cash I'd need to fund to that balance sheet to kick things off, and then build in some contingencies. You're coming into a new business. This was an asset deal. We've got to get set up with the customers. We got to make sure they have the right payment information. For us, we had probably just ended, so maybe the first 6 months, any purchase orders that were already awarded to the seller, he was going to get paid that check. And so then we'd have a true up, and they were great about that. They were cutting me checks twice a month as they got paid. But building all that in ultimately to say, let's make sure we don't run out of cash 6 weeks in.
Yeah. That's So powerful. And yet it just almost seems so intuitive. I'm kicking myself for never having done. Now I've never been in a working capital intensive business, but and just to be clear on the process of a 13-week cash flow, as current week ends, you just tack on the 13th week to the end. So you don't recreate it in batches of 13 weeks. You do it once, and then at the end of every week, you just tack on the next 13th week after that. Yeah. And
so, and just hide what happened before and keep track of what happened before, because then you can go back and also use that to see what actually happened. And it's a great point of reference to go back and look at that and maybe understand, okay, if we do grow, how is that going to impact things? Because that's the other challenge. Excessive growth has put a lot of companies out of business as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Brett, I wouldn't be surprised if you hear from a searcher or two out there asking if you'll do a 13-week cash flow for them. For you, it's probably really simple to put that together. For non-accountants, it's probably less so.
Yeah, happy to be a resource to anyone who could use it. And
I don't mean to, charge a good hourly fee for yourself, Brett. I'm just not trying to take your time from you, but I could imagine that just sounds like a very useful tool. And so I can imagine others wanting it. Yeah. Okay. So you buy the business, you're in the business. What can you say about your ownership of the business and how you actually find yourself spending actually less time in it than you thought you would, which is, again, it's a remote business. It's a construction business. All the reasons why you think that this would be a searcher business where it would be even harder than you thought. And it's actually been easier than you thought. Tell us about your tenure so far and why you think it's going so well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my previous experience has helped me immensely. I've gotten into a number of businesses where that very first one that I was the CFO of, I was the head of finance and the only person in finance when I started that. It was myself, the now minority owner, and the office manager who were doing all the financials before I joined. And then joined them and then did 4 acquisitions, grew internationally, and just very much complicated things, which required building out a team and getting very comfortable hiring people, getting them into the right spots, and growing things fastly. And so I learned early on that I'd much rather hand something off to somebody and set the expectation that they're going to make mistakes. They're probably going to screw something up, and it's not the end of the world. Almost anything they can do, we can fix. And so it was lessons from that I learned that helped me go into this business and look at what the seller and his wife were doing that maybe someone else could be doing, whether they were already in the business or that we could hire for them to do. And so try to be very intentional about, in those first couple of weeks and months, documenting what that was, trying to figure out what might work well, and then start executing on getting that out of my hands and leveraging the team to do that work. Definitely a few iterations of that, some stuff that didn't work, going down the path of looking at different software solutions, only to really look at, okay, does this maybe overcomplicate things? So some trial and error, but was able to take a lot of what was done, and you've got a very competent and capable foreman. So some of the stuff, leveraging his skill set and knowledge anyway to do that, and just getting out of the way. In other cases, it was moving from a very paper-based system to digital system. And then also hiring a virtual accountant out of the Philippines who's been amazing and has just been able to take things that I felt very comfortable with, the invoicing, all of the finance and accounting things that I could easily do myself, but that were taking quite a bit of my time and maybe weren't the best value add, that I can hand off to her and she can knock out and do, and just frees me up immensely.
Is she full-time?
She is. Originally, I was thinking she might be 20 to 30 hours. But she's been able to take the tasks that I've been able to hand off to her and then add to that pretty significantly. So I think now,
you mean taking on even more work than you?
Yes. So taking on even more work. So things like, you've probably seen the signs that 811 call before you dig, for every lot we do. So like if there's power lines or anything, you need to call or go online and make sure that the area is marked properly so that, anytime you dig in the earth, you're not digging into a power line or cable line. So with every lot we do, we have to submit that. So it's things like that every time a PO comes in, now it's on her task list to go ahead and submit that request, get that done. Stuff that the seller and his wife were doing.
And how many hours in total were they working in the business combined?
Combined, I think they represented that maybe he was doing around 20, 25 hours of work a week. She was maybe doing similar on the back end. His wife was doing all of the accounting, a lot of the administrative things. He was driving around in circles. He was driving around to the various sites to see, okay, we can do that lot's driveway next. Okay, they're excavating this ground. We can do that coming up here. All of the home builders have websites where they're called site superintendents, where they're scheduling out and they're saying, I want this driveway done on August 25th. This foundation is going to be ready here. So there are tools out there that they weren't using because they've been doing it the same way for 30 years that I was like, oh, great. Well, why don't I just look out here and then I can text the superintendent and say, hey, I see that you're going to be ready for us here. Is that still on track? So a lot of things that...
Well, you could even have somebody, your person in the Philippines do that. I mean...
Oh, absolutely. So now part of what she does is she builds out a schedule for me based on what's out there. I'm still actually doing a fair amount of that, but that's something else I can further take off my plate is figuring out where we're going to be, where we're pouring. My foreman's helping me out quite a bit with that as well too now, because you still do need a little bit of that. Hey, this is scheduled a month from now, but I actually see that the foundation's poured. You're going to want that like in 2 days. So it is helpful to be boots on the ground a little bit, but he's out there anyway. So it's helped me immensely. And then also we have to measure what we pour. So certain areas are more subjective, and part of, 10 hours a week, the seller was going out and measuring areas for invoicing. Now I've got my setup crew. Every time we set something up, one of the guys takes pictures and puts on there the measurements. So I've got that as a permanent record, and then have my virtual assistant. She's taking those and converting those into invoices and has me completely out of the mix on that. So it's just a lot of little things that have freed up my time quite a bit.
And so this is just a classic case of you bringing fresh eyes, looking for operational improvements. Some of that is putting in technology. Some of that is, frankly, pushing some of the work they were doing down to the guys in the field. Some of that is bringing in a new resource in the form of your woman in the Philippines, and giving this work to her. Just kind of a combination of all of that. But it's I say classic case because this is kind of the searcher thesis. Find a business where they're doing the things as they've always done them, and come in like a consultant and start making improvements. And it's just really worked in your case. It's really, I don't mean to over explain it. I mean, it's kind of as simple as that.
Yeah, no, it's worked fantastically. And I think it's gotten to the point where it allows us to more functionally grow, because otherwise the business is at a certain cap where, if it's me running around and figuring out where we need to go, where we need to pour, what we've poured, how much, the measurements, there's only so much of my time that I could do that. But by leveraging this out, it puts us in a position where then we can get those processes down. And as we grow, we can, get those to be very repeatable. So I think that tees us up really well for the next phase of where we're going.
Well, before we turn our attention to the next phase, which will close us out, tell us how much you are now working in the business. So what does your time commitment look like every week, and how often are you going out there?
Yeah. So I'd say realistically, I'm probably spending, given the day, 1 to 3, sometimes 4 hours on the business. In an average week, it probably drops down to maybe 2 hours a day on the business, maybe a little bit less. And that's when I'm at my home in Denver. When I'm out of the business, that started off, I was out there every week. That started ramping down to maybe skipping a week once a month for those first couple months, to, I think it's been almost 2.5 weeks since I was last out there. I am going out there on Tuesday, and when I'm out there, primarily what I'm doing is trying to make sure I'm out in the field. Talking with the site superintendents, making sure things are going well, addressing anything that's not, spending time with my foreman. What I'm learning is that what I was going out there and doing was, some of what the old owner was doing, driving around and finding out what we'd be doing next. And I'm finding that that's a little disruptive, because I'm having him do that, and then I'm coming in and taking that away from him for the time I'm out there, and then giving it back.
Yeah.
And so trying to stay out of the way with that. And so trying to manage what I'm doing while I'm out there. Mm-hmm. Additionally, buying 30 breakfast burritos and getting breakfast burritos to my guys, and, dropping them off as some appreciation for, the different folks working for the home builders. But really just meeting with them and being a presence, trying to be memorable when I'm out there. But it's certainly taking less and less of my time. And so I think, to answer your question, when I'm not there, maybe 10 hours a week, maybe a little bit more sometimes, but typically that's on things where we're trying to get into a new neighborhood and working on proposals and bids. And then when I'm out there, just spending time in the field, and I might be doing a little bit more and just checking that we have enough supplies and everything else. But a lot of that is going down significantly. One of the other things I was doing was measuring everything until I handed that off. So that's been a very recent change. We're probably only 3-4 weeks into that, but that's helped immensely, where now with the guy who's measuring it for me, I mean, he's doing a better job than I am. He's actually documenting it. Half the time I'd get out there, start talking to somebody, and realize that I left and forgot to look at one of the lots and had to drive back out there. And so it's taken that time down quite a bit.
You didn't know anything about this world or concrete even before you got into this?
Very little. I had worked with a few companies who did residential development, but that was very much on the out of the weeds, working on the business, theoretical, more numbers focused. But no concrete or construction hands-on experience before this.
And how have you found the learning curve of the business itself, of the service you sell, to be?
Definitely early on, it was a steep learning curve. I've gotten comfortable going in and not doing the fake it till you make it thing, and actually saying, I don't know. And so as things would come up, it helped early on. I was driving around with the seller, getting to meet all the site superintendents. But as things come up, I've gotten comfortable saying, I don't know. Let me look into that and find out and get back to you. And either reach out to the seller, talk to my foreman, 2 guys who have been in the business 30 plus years, and finding the answer and coming back and addressing it. But our business, very much like other businesses, is customer service focused. if you don't know the answer, I have found it being very receptive, me saying, I don't know, but if I get back to them in a couple hours or a day, that's gone quite a long way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been very receptive to me not being the most experienced guy out there and, not holding myself to that standard.
Yeah. That's great. I love that kind of trajectory of getting comfortable being like, I don't know, but I will get you an answer as soon as I possibly can. Do you so this is one of those businesses, Brett, where, who would have guessed that it existed? Well, of course, it relates to construction, and we know that, putting up a building requires a lot of different trades, but I'm not sure any of us have ever thought specifically about the fact that there could be a whole business of putting down the driveway, putting down the garage.
Yeah. I don't know many people that say concrete flatwork. I'm going after that one.
Yeah. So is this, but do you think that this is a good type of business for searchers in general, given, all of the kind of success of yours that you've just laid out? Or do you think that somehow yours is a diamond in the rough, maybe because of this great foreman, maybe because of the 30 years of in-market brand that it's built and connect, so do you think this is something that the listener listening right now should go out and look at in their own market?
Yeah, I think if you can get comfortable with the risk around new construction, ideally target a market that hopefully would be a little less susceptible to fluctuations where there is going to be a demand for that continued growth, maybe in places where there might not be. Then I think looking at targeting businesses that service home builders could be a very great business for people. It's very fragmented, not just concrete. You think about everything that goes into home construction. You've got typically the framers, the roofers, the guys doing the siding, sheetrock, electrical. A lot of times it's mom and pop businesses. Maybe there's a couple big businesses out there, but typically they can't service everybody. And so it is smaller businesses who have found their niche. And it's great work because you're not out there trying to figure out the next SEO algorithm, how to show up on Facebook or Instagram, or you look at HVAC, all that. You've got to become an expert in marketing or hire somebody who is, to be out there constantly finding that next project.
Yeah. And this point about being so tied to new home construction, which really I think it's fair to say would be the quote unquote weakness of the business, the thing to be concerned about, the primary thing to be concerned about. You had said how your seller in years past, when there was kind of a down cycle of new home building, diversified into residential reconstruction projects or repair or whatever,
Sure.
RV pads. How big is that market now that you're in the business? Do you feel like that is a way to hedge against the cyclicality, or is that just dribs and drabs and really isn't going to withstand a big downturn in new home construction?
I think it's a pretty significant market out there, and then is very complementary in the fact that oftentimes when you're seeing a market go down and you're not seeing the new home builds, you're seeing a lot of people staying put and reinvesting in their properties. In the Pacific Northwest, people often have a little bit more land and might have a shop that they want to build, and so they need a pad for their shop floor or an RV pad, or want to extend their patio. So there's a big market out there. There's areas that we just haven't had time to look into yet, but have considered getting into, even just the business of cleaning and sealing driveways, to looked at a few businesses that do the garage epoxy floors, especially in our business, very complementary to new home construction. And so we've got a lot of paths to look at right now. I see quite a bit of opportunity to continue to add on additional home builders that we're working with. But have thought about expanding into more residential work, which would take, a marketing arm and a few other things. But there are a lot of great companies that do that right now that, would be a way for us to diversify and mitigate some of that risk. So it's definitely in the back of my head on, what direction are we going to go next? And because I do have time for that, really considering some of those paths and what would make the most sense for the business.
Well, let's close out with that, Brett, and maybe tie in your conversation that you had with Adam Markley, who's been on the pod and is a friend, talking about what your next step should be. You just hinted that you're looking at acquisitions, but I think in talking to Adam, you talked about looking at acquisitions unrelated to your existing business. I don't want to steal your thunder, but that these various paths that you're considering, lay them out for us more explicitly, and then share what you kind of the conclusion of that conversation with Adam was.
Yeah, absolutely. So, having additional time on my hands, only, needing to work 10 hours or so when I'm not traveling out there, got me to thinking, what should I be doing with this additional time I have? And
other than cruising biz buy sell, looking for the next thing.
Yes.
or maybe that is what you should be doing.
That factored a lot into it, as well as, going down and looking at other forums and going down, looking at other broker listings. And so I started doing a lot of that and, listening to your podcasts as well as your other podcasts that you have, saying, okay, well, I've got a unique background that I think would make me very well suited to the independent sponsor path. Mm-hmm. And started going down that and looking at other businesses out there and found some interesting opportunities. Actually reached out to Matthias, who I'd talked to for a couple other acquisitions as well, and get his thoughts on, a larger transaction and understanding what I could maybe do with SBA with all the changes. And he actually recommended
Matthias Smith, Pioneer
Matthias
Capital.
Smith, yes.
Got to just plug my sponsor there. Thank you, Matthias. Carry on.
And so, thank you, Matthias. He's given me some great advice. I haven't had a chance to use him, but have come close a couple times.
Okay.
But he recommended talking to Adam about it. And after I went through everything with Adam, he's like, that could be a path to follow. It's like, that's going to be challenging, especially because a couple of the deals I was looking at had hair on them. And, as you look bigger, if you don't want to be competing with private equity, the perfect deals out there, you're probably not going to get a shot at as a new independent sponsor. He's like, look, you're going to be spending a lot of time raising funds, going through due diligence to get the deal done, to maybe, make a decent amount of money, but a couple $100,000 on, management fees and maybe some carry. But a lot of that, he's like, what if you just took half of that effort and put it back into your existing business? Worked on further refining the processes, but growing the business, getting it to SDE of over $1 million. He's like, where would that put you? You could mitigate some of the concentrations you have, increase the amount of revenue you're earning, the amount of income you're earning real time in the business. And regardless of if you want to sell or not, significantly increase the value of your business, all while, mitigating that risk. If you spend all this time on these other activities, what happens if something goes wrong in your current business? And so he really walked me through it. And, on one hand, kind of, was a downer for me for like, okay, I was pretty excited about going this other route. But as I reflected on it, I was like, that's really good advice. Why wouldn't I want to reinvest some of that time and really make sure that we succeed well, but look at growing the opportunity. There's so much potential for organic growth, as well as maybe a roll up or some other opportunities, but ultimately led me, and very recently, to kind of refocus my efforts. And so where next week I was going to go out to Washington for a couple of days, now I'm going to go out there for a little over a week, and really focus on how I go about, increasing the business size, doubling down on our efforts, and really focusing on where we should be going next.
And Brett, why I agree that Adam's advice was sage, but it's also interesting that that wasn't your first reflex anyway. Most searchers get into their businesses and they're thinking to themselves, once I've stabilized, once I've transitioned and stabilized and everybody's cool, like first thing on their minds usually is going to be how to grow this thing. So interesting that once you stabilized, you didn't say that to yourself. Instead, you said you kind of, forgive me, but maybe got a little bit of the shiny object syndrome, or why did you go so far afield from the thing right in front of you, which is grow your business, the one you got?
Yeah. So growing was always an objective, and it was, I think, originally slow and steady growth. And as I've gotten, so it was growing the business, but not as quickly, not as much. And I think it also plays into the fact that I do run it remotely. So I'm in Denver here, and, the opportunity to maybe not travel as much. And that growth will require me to be out there more.
Yeah.
So I think it's...
Yep. That's the answer. That makes sense.
That's the big piece of it.
Well, and so at almost an hour and a half here, Brett, we have uncovered a reason why there is a little bit of an imperfection to this thing where you're flying to the business, because you handled it so well. It's gone so well. It's just great. But in fact, maybe not imperfection, a cost, which is that absolutely. You find kind of there's this psychological effect where maybe you don't lean in as much as you would if it were in your backyard, because every time leaning in means going out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that really is it. And after my conversation with Adam, it was then sitting down with my wife and kind of playing out what, in the back of my head, we set expectations that I was going to be out there so much that when it didn't require me to be out there as much, it got comfortable. And I was like, okay, well, it's going well. I don't think it needs as much of my time. And then it was sitting down and refocusing and saying, okay, well, we can find a sweet spot here where, I'm not going to be out there full time, but maybe I go out there a little bit more than a couple days every 2 weeks. Maybe it is, a week every now and again. And it's a quick trip. It's a 2.5 hour flight. So it's not, it's not that crazy. So I think it's that is the reason for it. And I think we were comfortable with me doing a little bit more than I've gotten down to now.
Brett, anything else to share with the audience that I didn't ask you?
I think you covered it. I just appreciate what you're doing and the content you're putting out there. It's helped me immensely, given me some ideas, and I'm looking forward to, just being in this space, growing the current company, and, probably still revisiting other acquisitions down the line.
Yeah, no doubt. I see the twinkle in your eye. But I will say, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing this, how you've done this so successfully, because, we all try in our world to not oversell buying businesses, that it is hard. These are, fragile, messy institutions, these small businesses, and in construction notoriously. And so, but at the same time, I don't want to always just talk about, glum, how hard it is. I love that you just have had such good fortune with it, not good fortune, really to your credit. So I'm just thrilled to show the audience a real positive side of what's possible here. It's really cool what you built, and with all that time you got on your hands, we expect growth here, Brett. Expect big things from you. So
yeah, I'll be happy to update you on it.
We'll link to your LinkedIn. And what's the name of the business?
Morcrete Construction.
Morcrete.
Morcrete. Morcrete.
Got it. Great. Super. Brett Maxam, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate it.
Hope you enjoyed that interview. Don't forget to subscribe to the Acquiring Minds newsletter. We send an email for every episode with an introduction to the interview, a link to the video version on YouTube, and soon key takeaways, numbers, and more essentials from the interview for those of you who don't have time to listen or watch it. Subscribe at acquiringminds.co. You'll also find all our webinars there on the website, both those we have coming up and recordings of past webinars. At this point, there are over 30 webinar recordings, a wealth of information on all the technical nitty-gritty of buying a business. acquiringminds.co.